So I heavily started getting into vintage fashion when I was 17 years old. I really found it to be fascinating and beautiful, and I just found like great confidence in wearing it because of the sustainability factor and just like the old Hollywood aspect. As I might have mentioned before, I really fell in love with old Hollywood, particularly The Wizard of Oz, and then later like Marilyn Monroe, Audrey Hepburn. I was also in productions of My Fair Lady and The Children's Hour when I was a senior in high school. So I was just very much into old Hollywood. I was taking acting classes too at school and very heavily involved in the theater world and art world at my high school. So that really kind of set the stage for me wanting to be just like getting into old Hollywood. And so, of course, like the fashions of that time period became very interesting to me. I then started getting into thrifting as I got older, obviously, and I went to college. Like, I started making my own money and I was able to like start buying more of my own clothes, really figuring out my own style. Because before that, growing up as a kid, I just kind of was like given, clothing. I really didn't have much of a say in what I could wear. And so once I started thrifting, obviously that helped tremendously. And I loved finding like authentic vintage um, at thrift stores. And they weren't, they didn't necessarily have to be authentic vintage, as in like something from the actual 50s or 60s or 40s. It was more of just, stuff from the 90s and a lot from the 80s that had a very similar flair to it, obviously, since, trends repeat and whatnot. And I also went through a little bit of a goth phase, which was really fun. And so it was like a vintage goth phase. So I would wear a lot of vintage clothes, but it was all kind of like, black velvet and whatnot, which was super fun. How I got into styling. So once I started to really kind of dive in and figure out what my personal style was, people would always start commenting. They were like, wow, I love your style. It's so unique. It's so well put together. And people would just make the comment of, I wish like you would style me. And these were not just random people. These were people that were in positions of power, like businesswomen. And because I liked wearing suiting a lot. I liked wearing suiting. I liked looking quote unquote professional, but in kind of like a more artsy way, which really spoke to me. And yeah, and then I got older. I started working at the art museum that is in my city. And first as a gallery attendant, and later on, I would do their marketing. And I was heavily involved in their costume institute, which is one of the few costume institutes in the nation with like the second largest fashion collection, like second to the Met. And again, people were in like that fashion space that were very knowledgeable, not just about current trends, but the history of fashion, including the fashion curator. I just started really like falling in love with all that. And people again would be like, oh, you'd be really good at styling me, or I wish you'd style me. And then after a while, I was like, fuck it. I kind of want to start my own business styling people. And so I think it had always been in me. It's something I'd wanted to do for a long time, but it wasn't until I got a little bit older and had experienced, working at a 9 to 5 and realizing like, I don't really know if that's something for me. Um, and realizing like, no, I'm very entrepreneurial. I want to do what I want and go after my dreams. And so, yeah, that's how I started styling. And I've been doing it for about a year now. I'm still growing a lot and start more of my online community. I just kind of like solidified my YouTube. I don't know why. I was so afraid to just jump into YouTube, and now I'm starting, and I'm so happy that I did. And yeah, I'm really excited to start growing more and more on social media. And so that is the basis of how I started getting into styling. What was my kind of big turning point in wanting to get into vintage fashion, or why does fashion like excite me so much? I would say it excites me because it was the only way that I was able to really just like look how I wanted to look and be who I wanted to be. I was always like kind of bullied growing up. I'm very petite. I'm only like 4'10". And so I'd always kind of had a target on my back growing up, and also coming from a family where like I never had an allowance. Like people would only give me a little bit of money on my, during my birthday or Christmas, and that was about it. And so I didn't have a lot of change for me myself to just like go out and buy like the latest fashions. So I always felt like a little bit dorky and a little bit not well put together growing up until I got a bit older, like in high school when I was able to start shopping, and in college as well, and like make and started to make my own money. And that really opened the door for my self expression. And I found people were suddenly starting to respect me more. I had never really been respected. I'd always been kind of seen as like this weird little dorky artsy girl, the weird art girl, which is not a bad thing. I think being a weird art girl is one of the best things you can possibly be in this day and age, as far as I'm concerned. Um, Non-conforming, creative, entrepreneurial, artistic, wanting to like change the world in your own way. I think that's extremely powerful and important to be right now. And so I really wanted to start creating my own style. Just the power, not just the power, but also the way in which I was able to just conjure my own sense of self through clothing. Like clothing has always been so powerful, and it has always allowed me to just be who I am in a way that like nothing else really could. And then as I got older, obviously graduated college, I went back to school. So I graduated with a fine art degree. I studied primarily like figurative painting. I wanted to learn how to paint realistically, especially after I had been to Italy um, as a kid at 15. It really set me up to like loving traditional painting, and I wanted to learn as much as I could about it. And so that's what I wanted to study, as well as film. I again was obsessed with film, so I at one point double majored, but then ended up minoring in film and focusing on screenwriting. Though I kind of regret that. I wish I had just gotten a full on film degree and a painting degree. But, you live and you learn. And afterwards, I then went back to school and studied like graphic design and marketing. And I really wanted to just learn how to create things in different ways. And I just was continuing to come into my own. And then once I started working, I was able to afford like better clothes. And that's when I first started getting into like authentic, like 1950s vintage. And yeah, it was something that I really, really liked, and really something that I wanted to continue to be a part of. And yeah, it was something I really enjoyed. I really just fell in love with it. It made me feel so powerful because it allows you to like transform your appearance. It really allows you to just become yourself in many ways. This is the finished look. I hope you enjoyed listening to my little story time about how I got into vintage fashion and how I got into styling. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.